Welcome back to the Guild Tremor video strategy guides. I'm Danton, one of our main tanks, and today I'll be explaining the 10-man Lady Deathwhisper encounter within the lower spire of Icecrown Citadel. Lady Deathwhisper has just over 3.3 million hit points and can't be dealt any damage to until the shield she casts on herself is taken down. Every hit on her shield takes that amount of damage from her mana pool, which is a whopping 3.2 million. There are two phases to the fight. She is untankable, has an enrage timer of 10 minutes, and has no true threat table during the first phase. Around 5 seconds after engaging Lady Deathwhisper and every 60 seconds thereafter, 3 adds will spawn on one side of the room. The adds must be tanked and killed before dealing damage to Lady Deathwhisper's shield, as they will be a nuisance and more than likely slowly overrun and destroy your raid if not dealt with. This phase is essentially a DPS check for your raid. These mobs will continue to spawn until Lady Deathwhisper's shield is destroyed, beginning phase 2. Lady Deathwhisper herself will cast one of two damage abilities. The first is Shadow Bolt, which is not interruptible and is cast on a random player. The other ability is Death and Decay. Now, there are two differences between this version and a Death Knight's version. The boss's version deals more damage, and it's colored green instead of red. Lady Deathwhisper will also alter the adds that spawn in different ways. Cult Fanatics, one of the adds that will spawn, melee very hard, cleave, and apply a nasty debuff that negates the next 9,000 healing received. When transformed, they become Deformed Fanatics and gain a 100% damage increase from the transformation, and gain a new ability called Vampiric Might, which increases their damage and heals them for 300% of the damage that they cause. Vampiric Might can and should be dispelled, purged, or spell stolen. Cult Adherents, on the other hand, will deal moderate amounts of spell damage through their Death Chill Bolt, which does around 7,500 Shadow Frost damage. Their other abilities include Curse of Torpor, which increases ability cooldowns by 15 seconds, and Frost Fever, which is cast on random targets. Adherents become very dangerous AoE damage casters when empowered by Lady Deathwhisper. Upon being empowered, the Adherents will cast a spell called Shroud of the Occult, which absorbs up to 50,000 damage. While the Shroud of the Occult is up, they will cast Death Chill Blast, which deals around 10,000 Shadow Frost damage to all enemies within 10 yards of their target. Let it be noted that both Fanatics and Adherents can and will be subject to an ability called Dark Martyrdom. This has a 4-second cast time and causes the caster to explode for 12,000 Shadow Storm damage to all targets within 15 yards, and leaves a skeleton of the caster behind, which will be reanimated shortly thereafter. Reanimated Adherents will become nearly immune to all magical damage, and reanimated Fanatics will become nearly immune to all physical damage. Both will have the same abilities that they had before. Our strategy was to have both of our tanks on one side, and grab out the adds and just burn them down as fast as possible. If an ad became empowered, deformed, or reanimated, that specific ad became our primary target. In order to wrangle these adds up to be as close together as possible, we used the two pillars near Lady Deathwhisper to line of sight them, forcing the adds to move as close to the tank as possible. This also forced them to be near Lady Deathwhisper and to minimize downtime in switching between her and the adds. The only downside is that Death and Decay tends to be cast under everyone's feet at the most inopportune times. Phase 2 begins when Lady Deathwhisper's shield is brought down. The adds will cease to spawn, but any left over will stay alive until killed. Lady Deathwhisper's threat is reset at this time, and she will need to be picked up by the closest tank. She will cast Frostbolt as her primary attack, which can and should be interrupted as often as possible. She will also cast Frostbolt Volley randomly. The main ability to be on the lookout for here is something called Touch of Insignificance. This is a stacking debuff that, when applied to the target, will reduce threat generated by 20% per stack and will stack up to 5 times. This debuff lasts for 30 seconds and cannot be dispelled by normal means. It is strongly advised that the DPS watches their threat during this phase, as they can easily outpace the tank. The only other ability she will use is to summon a Vengeful Shade every so often. This shade cannot be tanked, dealt damage to, or crowd controlled at all, and will deal around 18,000 Shadow Frost damage to all targets within 15 yards upon reaching their target. Lady Deathwhisper has no other tricks and should be very straightforward from phase 2 until the end. Our strategy called for completely ignoring the shades, taunting Lady Deathwhisper back and forth between our tanks every few stacks, and generally zerging her down. As always, thanks for watching our videos. If you have any questions, I encourage you to post them in the YouTube comment section below, or feel free to visit our website forums at www.feelthetremor.com.